All right, thank you everybody for shuffling back. Our next speaker is ready to go, so I'm gonna introduce him and we'll be off. So Sabin Adams is the public lands manager with Pheasants Forever. He lives near Osakis, Minnesota, and spends as much time as possible roaming the wild spaces around Minnesota with his friends and family. Sabin.
Just need to jot down one quick note before we get started, which is don't give a presentation about prairie restoration work before Greg Hoke tells you it doesn't exist. Now that I know that, let's start over. As he said, my name is Sabin Adams. I'm the Minnesota Public Lands Manager with Pheasants Forever. And we drove here this morning, my son and I, from the little town of Osakis, Minnesota. And know your audience. So Osakis is pretty popular for our western grebes on the lake, but the local birders know that the really good hotspot is the wastewater pond south of town. We're not as good as Albany, but we got some birds. So I titled this presentation, Minnesota Public Lands and Our Habitat Mission, Pheasants and Other Wildlife. Because at Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever, our mission is, see if I can do this from memory. Pheasants Forever's mission is to conserve pheasants, quail, and other wildlife through habitat improvements, public access, education, and conservation advocacy. They make us memorize that. No, they don't actually. But if you notice, we've got pheasants and quail, but the big one is other wildlife. We talk about this a lot at work because we do a lot of things that don't necessarily benefit pheasants. But we're all very proud of our habitat mission. And the first piece there is through habitat improvements. And our favorite words on our logo, you've got Pheasants Forever, but there's three little words there, the Habitat Organization, and we really pride ourselves on being the Habitat Organization. And if you remember back, if you were on the internet probably a decade or more ago, this was a really popular meme. And so I threw one together for me. And so as a Pheasants Forever employee, my mom probably envisions that I'm Sir David Attenborough with some majestic bird. My dad, who is like the Tim Allen, fixing cars and turning wrenches, listening to me talk, and I'm like, gosh, you should have seen all the blazing stars out there. And I think that's probably what he thinks. What the public thinks we do, you would not believe how many questions, emails, phone calls that we get from people. Do you guys have any pheasants that we can buy? And so just setting the record straight, we don't raise pheasants, we don't stock pheasants, and we don't condone the stocking of pheasants, but it's hard to escape your logo. What my friends think I do, I spend a lot of time driving around with friends, and I'm constantly saying, oh yeah, we restored all those wetlands, and they think I'm out there. Sometimes I wish I was, but what I think I do, which I don't think is too far from the truth, I'm not that grumpy, but I do stare at a computer screen a lot. But this is what we actually do. And the key focuses for my talk today are going to be looking at public land acquisitions, as well as public land enhancements. And so those are the two main focuses that myself and my team do, is working on public lands here in Minnesota. And the key to that is that all of it relates back to wildlife habitat. So getting started with public land acquisitions, way over there is a map of Minnesota. And every one of those dots is a property that Minnesota Pheasants Forever has acquired since the beginning of Pheasants Forever. And as of last Wednesday, we acquired our 500th property. All of these properties are being acquired, and then we donate them primarily to the Minnesota DNR or to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to become wildlife management areas or waterfowl production areas. And so every one of those dots is one of the properties that we've worked on. If you put all of those dots together into one area, it equates to about 67,700 acres. And I realize, thank you. I realize after having so many conversations with people where they'll say, oh yeah, it's about 5 acres. And then we go back and map it and it's like 1 or maybe 10, that most of the time people don't have a very good feel for what acres are. And 67,000 is going to be hard to grasp either way. But the area of Minneapolis and St. Paul, the city limits of the two of those are about 70,000. So a couple more years and we will be that size. So I've got a few example projects that I want to talk to you about. Know your audience. And so we've partnered for the last couple decades with the Minnesota Sharp-tailed Grouse Society to do a number of acquisitions up in their region. Those would be this is one of those properties, the Crochel WMA in Kanabec County, which is 1,270 acres, which is about 960 football fields, which I now realize is also really hard to imagine what 960 football fields looks like, but you get the picture. This property is very significant because it is one of the only places left in Kanabec County where you can still find sharp-tailed grouse. And if you're familiar with the sharp-tailed grouse in Minnesota, you'll know that that eastern population between Duluth and the metro has really been declining in the last couple of decades. And so Pheasants Forever and the Sharp-tailed Grouse Society have been in partnership for about as long as those birds have been in decline. We've been working very hard to do what we can to protect the places where the sharp-tailed grouse still exists, but also try and enhance the habitat where maybe there used to be sharp-tailed grouse and there no longer is. But that's a continued fight that we just keep working on, is trying to save the sharp-tailed grouse in the east central zone of Minnesota. I'm a big fan of the grouse. As much as I love the colorful Eurasian friend on my logo, I'm a very big fan of grouse, the sharp-tails, the prairie chickens, the rough grouse, spruces. And so when I get to pick the projects for the presentation, see what happens. This is probably up there as one of my favorite acquisitions that we've ever done. This is the Cupido WMA in Norman County. It is 960 acres, and that is the equivalent of 3 Minnesota State Fairgrounds. If you've ever walked around the fairgrounds for a day and went, man, I think of this, 3 times. All right, so Norman County, here we go. Good thing I put this map in here. Problem. All right, so the Cupido WMA, this was a very, very key piece for the Minnesota Prairie Chicken Society because the existing, you can see on this map, all of those other colors are other public lands, other wildlife management areas. And so it was filling in a piece and building onto an already large complex of public lands. But between this area, there is a very good population of prairie chickens. And one of the things that made this property so exciting was members of the Minnesota Prairie Chicken Society have been talking to the numerous landowners of this parcel since sometime in the 1960s about trying to protect it, about doing conservation work out there. And then in, I believe it was 2018, we were finally able to make it happen and turn that into a permanently protected wildlife management area to hopefully hold on to the greater prairie chicken in Minnesota forever. All right. The next piece that I wanted to talk about is the Litchfield waterfowl production area in Meeker County. It's a little closer to home. This is just south of the town of Litchfield. And so you see the blue parcel there and the green parcel there are the 2 pieces that Pheasants Forever acquired. In total, they're 296 acres, which is 2.3 Mall of Americas. The significance of this one to the group is back earlier this summer, Minnesota Bound aired an episode called The Disappearing Meadowlarks. And in that episode, they went out with Scott Gloop, who is the manager of the Litchfield Wetland Management District, and they drove all over Minnesota looking for western meadowlarks. And just about everybody kind of talked about western meadowlarks, and maybe nobody wants to be the buzzkill. Well, according to Greg, maybe they don't belong here at all. I'm not sure. But according to the North American breeding bird, or the North American Bird Atlas, the western meadowlark has declined by, I believe, is 53% in North America, and Minnesota breeding bird studies suggest 98% in Minnesota. So very significant decline of this bird. And the great story with this is that parcel in red down in the southwest corner of the property, that is where the Wetland Management District headquarters is. So that's where Scott Gloop works every day. And this, I believe it was not this past summer, but the summer before, he said he pulled into the office one day and he could hear a western meadowlark singing at the office. And we had just restored parcel A in the southeast. And then next summer, we had restored the parcel B in the northwest there. And in the next summer, I believe he said there were 6 males singing outside of the parking lot. And so we're really hoping that that population continues to grow, and we're also really hoping that some of the other neighbors, seeing the changes to the landscape and how the wildlife react, we can maybe get some additional conservation or some other properties to build onto that habitat complex. Another thing that we do a lot of is not just buying the land, but we restore and enhance that property before we donate it to the DNR or the Fish and Wildlife Service. But we also do restoration and enhancement work on existing public land. So a WMA or a WPA that's out there that could use some enhancement work, we have funds and staff to go out and enhance that. And so this is the Corral WPA in Clay County, which was right below Norman County. And, oops. So we did, let's see, we did a tree removal, because as was talked about earlier, one of the things that we suffer with in our prairie restorations is a lot of invasive and brush growth in these areas. And so this was a before and after when we did the tree removal. Now this is a very good prairie chicken property in Clay County, which is why I picked it. But now this past summer and fall, that was from last year, this past summer and fall, we did 37 prairie pothole restorations out there. I don't have an updated picture yet, but I bet it will look spectacular when we finally get some rains again, because they're probably dry. And then a tip, if you're ever coming across a place where you can see the dozers or that guy in the excavator has recently did those wetland restorations, and we get some rain, that exposed soil around that new wetland restoration is a super hot spot for shorebirds. Of course, no presentation about all of this work would be complete without mentioning our partners. I talked about Minnesota Prairie Chicken Society and the Sharp-tailed Grouse Society. Minnesota DNR is a huge partner of ours, along with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. NACA is the North American Wetlands Conservation Act. They're one of our largest funders. And then over there is our biggest funder, and without them, without the Minnesota Clean Water Land and Legacy Amendment, everything that you've seen gets cut into, 3/4 of it doesn't happen. The voters in 2008 passing the Legacy Amendment and setting aside 3/8 of 1% of sales tax revenue, as Ron Shera has said, is the greatest gift we've given ourselves. So much conservation work is happening in this state because of that. So gotta make sure we support it. 2034 is when it expires, and it'll come up again, hopefully. But of course, you're probably looking and saying, where is Minnesota Ornithological Union? So a couple of years ago, this group decided to partner with us to help acquire a wildlife management area. This is the Rush WMA in Monoman County. Back. It was right next to. All right. So this is a 96-acre parcel, which is the equivalent of 4 U.S. bank stadiums. And so we bought this a couple of years ago, and so restoration work just began on it. One of the things that we deal with on these properties is residual herbicide carryover. And so the farmer previous to us applied some chemical, and we keep hearing more and more and more about these chemicals where a lot of them have a 10 or a 12-month or 18-month carryover, as in that chemical will live in the soil, or not live in the soil, but be active in the soil for 12, 18 months. And so then anything that we plant that's not resistant to that will die. And now we're hearing about 36-month residual carryover in some herbicides. And so a lot of times what we have to do, is, which was the same case in this one, is we had to farm it for another year, but we just restrict what chemicals the farmer can apply while we wait for that herbicide to come out of the soil. But so I believe this spring we seeded the cropland acres on this property, and then as you can see by this picture down here, all of those dots are potholes that we restored as well, and it is adjacent to a large, I believe, the Rush WMA is about 1,200 acres. It's another prairie chicken site, and the contractor that was actually out in that dozer took a picture of that prairie lily. There's a couple patches of remnant prairie out on the tract that we were pretty pleased to have saved on that property. And thanks to this group, we were able to make that a reality. All right. That's my name. That's my contact. So, anybody got any questions?
Hi, thank you. What can you tell us about the effects of non-native pheasant populations on native birds?
It depends on what species in particular you're talking about. I don't think it's a secret or something that we shouldn't talk about, but we do know that pheasants can be parasites on prairie chicken nests, and that can be problematic for prairie chickens in certain areas. As far as I know, that's probably the biggest competition factor that I'm aware of with pheasants. But I'll reiterate the continued stance of myself and Pheasants Forever. We just keep putting habitat in the ground, and whatever shows up is whatever wildlife species come is what we want to support.
Describe a little bit more about wetland restoration. Do you dig new holes, or do you fix old holes, or how does it work?
We fix the old holes. Yeah, so we don't do wetland creation, we do wetland restoration. And so you can't buy a property in the prairie region of Minnesota without finding degraded or drained wetlands on it. And so we do a lot of plugging of drainage ditches, breaking of tile, and then almost all of them are eroded in some way where the adjacent farmland has filled that basin in. And so then we'll do a soil core, and you can see very cleanly on a soil core where you go, that's upland soil, oh, wetlands. And so then you'll have a measurement of, you got to go take this much off the top, and we'll have a nice clean haircut, and we can start new with that wetland. And wetland seeds survive surprisingly well in that condition, where even after decades and decades of having soil on top, you can scrape that soil off and they'll be there again.
Do you work with the Nature Conservancy at all?
Yes, we do. We partner with them on a whole lot of projects. They do a lot of the same things that we do, and so there's always a ton of communication. Particularly, properties come for sale all over the place, and we're aware of the funding that they have available, and they're aware of the funding that we have available. And so if something doesn't work for us, but I know that this is something the Nature Conservancy would want, I'm quick to make a phone call and say, you guys should go after this, and vice versa. They'll do the same for us.
Okay, thank you for presentation. In terms of collaborating with Native American nations, these type of programs, is there any history or how feasible or complex is to, involve other groups on, once you acquire or, on these efforts of conservation?
So I don't think there's much history there. We've done a few things with in the sharp-tailed grouse range in Carlton and Aiken County. And I know we've had a few projects where up in Monoman County where we thought if this goes forward, we're going to have some opportunities for partnership, but those projects just didn't come to fruition. But we're open to any of the conversations and partnering with whoever will help us do more wildlife habitat.
One last question there.
This is not a science question. I'm wondering who gets to keep the big prairie chicken thingy on the wheels?
I believe that belongs to the city of Rothsay. It is, yep. Yep,
Excellent. Thank you, Sabin.
thank you.